Hey everybody, it's Jason Blaha here, and today I want to talk to you guys a little bit about some of the really pervasive myths that we see when people talk about stimulating muscle growth. And again, a lot of it stems from the bodybuilding culture and the bro culture and everything, and people don't always understand these concepts. Now, that being said, these concepts, just believing them in and of itself, doesn't harm you in any way. I mean, let's be honest. If you're coming in and training hard, you're stimulating growth, you're getting enough rest, recovery, food, you're going to gain muscle mass. No matter what you believe or what philosophy you've been taught, that's not going to prevent you from gaining muscle. Like, you can believe this stuff completely wrong, but if you put in the work, you eat the food, and you sleep, you're obviously going to gain muscle. And that's fine. The problem becomes when you start believing in bizarre concepts and you start trying to create hypothetical situations of how you can maximize these things. And that's where it becomes a problem. And two of them that I really want to talk about today are this concept of tearing down muscle fibers. Like, people honestly think that causing tears and rips all through your muscle fibers, physical tears from them being pulled, stimulates muscle growth. And this idea of blood volume training, like if you trap blood in the muscle, that causes more nutrients and everything to get to it. And these are just silly concepts, and they're fine. It's not going to hurt you to believe those things. It's not going to interfere with your gains at all. If you believe that that's the mechanism that your training causes you to gain muscle through, that's fine, because you're still training. Doesn't matter what's really going on, does it? The problem becomes, again, when you start saying, okay, well, if this causes more micro tears in the muscles, then this must be the way to gain muscle mass. You guys see how that could become a problem, and that it's not actually true. It's not actually true at all. Not even remotely true. And the thing is, the reason that people come up with this concept is that they're thinking of tissue protein disruption. Meaning, when you started doing enough work, that your body starts breaking down proteins inside your muscle fibers. This is a very catabolic thing. Your body responds by basically storing more proteins there. Meaning, for the catabolic response of your body digging into your muscle tissue for a fuel source. That's what we're talking about. That's what we mean by breakdown of muscle tissue. All right, we're talking about your body using it for fuel. It would be the same thing as breaking down your fat tissue by doing cardio. Sure, your body's getting lipids out of there. Well, in this case, your body is running out of immediate glucose sometimes in the muscles. It starts breaking down proteins in your muscle fibers for a source of glucose sometimes when you start reaching metabolic fatigue. And when that happens, your body releases various metabolites that we can measure. So we can measure protein breakdown and turnover in the muscle tissue based upon metabolites that have been released into the bloodstream. But it doesn't mean that you've ripped the muscles, or you've actually started ripping the fibers. I mean, the fibers are breaking down, but they're breaking down chemically, meaning your body's extracting a fuel source from them. It's a chemical breakdown. It's not causing physical rips. And that's the problem we have with this concept. People think that this is actually true. And the reality is, when you start actually physically tearing the little micro tears, all these little things start really forming and becoming serious. That's called rhabdo. And when that happens, you start, one of the biggest signs you get is not only intense pain, but you start seeing bloody like urine. Meaning your urine turns orange. You know why your urine's turning orange? Because there are proteins being released into your bloodstream because the muscles are tearing apart and little chunks of the protein are breaking off. Right? They're breaking off. And then it puts a strain on your kidneys because it's got to filter this stuff out. A lot of people don't know this, but your blood doesn't have proteins in it normally, not like you're thinking of. When you eat protein, it breaks down into amino acids. When you start having proteins ripping off of the sides of your muscle tissue, it creates foreign proteins in your bloodstream. That's not a good thing, and you exhibit medical symptoms. All right, when you've trained excessively and this happens, that's a bad thing. You almost always lose muscle when this happens. Not only do you get physically sick, the muscles that you've caused this in actually usually shrink slightly because you've actually damaged them. You've caused physical damage to them. And it doesn't repair the same way. So there's a big difference between causing physical damage of a muscle tissue through overwork. That's always a bad thing. It will actually make you sick. It can hurt you, it can kill you, it can damage your kidneys, it can damage the muscle. Versus your body creating a catabolic response in there and pulling fuel out of the muscle proteins. Right? It's using them as a fuel source to get sugar out of them, basically, to get glucose out of them. That's what's going on. We're talking about muscle protein breakdown. It's not physical tearing like people think. So accordingly, when you start saying, oh, I should do a bunch of really, really slow negatives because it causes more micro tears in the muscle, actually it doesn't. Slow negatives cause micro tears in the connective tissue. That's why you get sore from it. Understand the difference there. You're getting micro tears through the connective tissue. And that's the soreness you feel from doing really slow negatives. Totally different animal. Totally different animal. But, you know, what we do know is that when you cause more metabolites to be released, like we're talking about, which again, measurable in the bloodstream, we can measure this. That's usually associated with more muscle growth. And it's because the more catabolic chemical response that's induced inside the muscle tissue, the body responds the other direction. Like it's just like when you push anything in the body a certain direction, your body is designed to create a form of homeostasis with everything, to create balance. And in order to rebalance anything negative, it will push something all the way back the other direction, an equal and opposite response to the other swing on the other side of the pendulum of muscle growth. It'll create a larger anabolic response to that catabolic response that you created. That's why doing more work, usually over time, equates to more muscle gains, because you've caused a deeper chemical response in the muscle tissue. And that's what's going on there. And that's done purely through doing more work. More work. The more work a muscle does, usually the faster it grows. And we know that. We know that from watching that in the gym. Common sense, isn't it? Anyone who's watched different people train over the years, usually the people who are training the hardest, not always do tend to gain a little more muscle than the people who don't train as hard. So you would know that without looking at the research, without seeing all the studies. Most people have kind of figured that out by now. If you work harder, you usually get better results. Most of the time. There are exceptions, but most of the time it's a good general rule. Now, as far as the blood volume thing, that is, again, totally absurd. Like, what world do people think that your muscles have the ability to store blood? Like, man, you trap a bunch of blood in there and it gives you the... That's not what the pump is. That's not what the pump is at all. The pump is also a chemical response. It's a buildup of metabolites. You don't trap blood in your muscle tissue. Furthermore, when people need to think in those terms, like, well, if there's a lot of blood flow and a lot of blood trapped in the muscle tissue, that's going to give more nutrients to it. Well, why would that give more nutrients? You do realize the amount of blood passing through any area only has a fraction of a second of nutrients for that area. That's why it's pumping all the time. That's why your blood flows continually, because your blood actually gets depleted of the glucose and nutrients and thing that it's where the tissues it's going to pretty quick. And I mean, this whole idea where you're trapping blood in there to give nutrients for what, a couple of minutes? You really think some extra nutrients for 3 minutes, for 5 minutes after a workout or during a workout, do you really think that's enough nutrition to stimulate more muscle growth? You're going to grow for hours. Your growth window can last up to 2 days. In fact, most of the growth isn't initial. Usually most of the growth starts really kicking in once you're sleeping. Like the next time you sleep after a workout, during that recovery of all of that during the sleep, is usually when the really big chunk of your muscle growth takes place. So in what world does a little bit of extra pump in blood at that point matter? And furthermore, if people were really overly concerned with that, oh, more blood flow, well, you'd probably be more cardiovascularly fit, wouldn't you? That would help, because people who do a lot of cardio have more capillary beds all through their muscle tissue. That's a fact. Now, is there something to be said for increased blood flow in recovery? And recovery equals growth, right? Yeah. What do we know based upon all the data I've talked about with you guys, stuff I've released from Alex Viada, stuff I've released from Greg Nuckols. I've linked some of his stuff before in the past. Data showing that people, strength athletes, who start doing large amounts of low-intensity cardio, lose strength at first, but then 6 months down the road, they're stronger than if they hadn't done the cardio, and we compare them in different groups. Why? Because being more cardiovascularly fit improves the blood flow to your muscles. It improves your ability to clear waste products. Clearing waste products out is part of your recovery. So that sort of increased blood flow can enhance recovery. That sort of enhanced recovery can give you small extra amounts of muscle growth and stimulation, adaptation, right? Adaptation to the stimulation, because you recover faster. All right, now that sort of blood flow absolutely is beneficial, but it takes time to build that up. That's not something you're going to do by getting a pump right now in the gym. All right, that's not going to happen. And the pump, again, people are confusing trapping blood in the muscle tissue with the pump. It's not the same thing. You don't have a place to store blood in your muscle tissue. It's not like you have big vessels that fill up with blood to make it swell up. Your penis has that. Your penis has that. That's how your penis gets its pump. But your muscles don't have compartments to store blood in like that, like you're thinking. It doesn't pack up. And if it did, it would actually not be good for you. It wouldn't help. It would be the opposite. It would be harmful. So again, another myth that people just come up with out of nowhere. All right, guys, but that's really all I have to say on that today. I hope it's been informative, and I will talk to you guys next time.